And then prepare. I had one interview where I was preparing for, I mentioned I bombed a few. One of them, I struggled with name a timeline questions. So I spent hours preparing name a timeline questions. And this interview rolls around and they ask me no name a timeline questions. They asked me about my resume, like to the bullet. And I hadn't looked, I looked at my resume, but I hadn't thought about, because I wrote it months back. And I just been using these tools to get the application out. And I hadn't gone back and reviewed my resume. And they were asked, like, what is this one bullet? Tell me about this project and how much money you saved on this. Like, what was this? And I froze. I don't know. And I went back, and afterward, what I did was I went back through my resume, I printed it out, and I wrote next to it. I had a little tangible copy, and I said, this is this project. This is this project. This is this project, so I could remember. And it helped a lot. But doing those things, right, like doing all the preparation, when you prepare, it lets you relax, for me anyway. I think about, you read the job description, I look up the company, get some factoids on the company, practice my name a timeline questions, grab a handful of like stories, like kind of generic stories I can kind of bend in a few, morph in a few different ways. But you got to prepare, because even the most professional of us, even the people that, and like I said, 100%, I thought I was just going to be a master at this, and you will learn the hard way that it is a skill. So just preparing and doing all the things ahead of time and taking it as seriously as you can will help you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Job Seeker's Journey. There is a human element to every facet of the job seeking journey. There are humans that are obviously looking for jobs. There are humans that are recruiters. There are humans that are hiring managers. There are humans that are decision makers that are helping the hiring managers decide who they want to hire. And I have long wanted to, on this podcast, highlight the human nature of every single element of this journey. And I have talked to just about everyone. I've talked to recruiters and hiring managers and coaches and a lot of different people, but who I haven't had a chance to talk to yet until today is a fellow job seeker. Today I speak to David Holub, who also, as he says in my conversation with him, goes by Chris. So you'll hear me refer to him as David at the beginning, which is what he formally goes by on LinkedIn and different places. But I will also call him Chris at the end because, as he explains, he actually goes by that name. And I was very excited to speak to him because I've been following him on LinkedIn as he was going through his job search journey, which I was also going through for a long time. And I got a chance to hear his thought process, his strategy, and things like that. So I'm very excited for you to hear this conversation. So without further ado, here is my conversation with David/Chris Holub. All right, I'm here with David. Is it Holub? Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Holub. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm here with David Holub. And I just told you this right before I hit record, but I've been really excited about this because a few weeks ago, I was kind of analyzing the podcast and analyzing who all I've talked to and the guests that I've had. And I've had great guests and I've loved every conversation I've had. But I realized that I've talked to professionals around going through a job search, and I hadn't talked to someone yet that was like myself that had been going through a job search. So when I came across you, I saw you, your posts started popping up on my LinkedIn feed and I started reading them and I was like, oh, I really like his perspective. And so I just was like, this would be a great person for me to reach out to and see if you'd be willing to share your story. And before we get going, congratulations are in order because you did start a new position on Monday, which is amazing. Congratulations for that.
Thanks.
But I thought it'd be a really good conversation for us to have to talk about your journey and talk about what all you went through and how you evolved and all those things. So before we do that, I'll let you give a quick introduction of yourself so that people know who you are, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, sure. So my first name is David, and you see that on all of my formal stuff. And actually, I changed it on my LinkedIn. I go by Chris, so that's why if you
Okay.
see anything, it also has Chris on it. I go by Chris. My dad's name is David, and they didn't want me to be called Little David, so Big David, Little David. So I go by my middle name, and so then I did that to my son. So he's David Tyler, and we call him Tyler. So I told him one day, if he has a son names him David, he can call him David or Davy or whatever, and it'll be fine. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas. I grew up in a small town outside of Wichita Falls, Texas, called Holiday. It's about 1,600 people. So I'm from a really small town. Went to school there in Wichita. I went to college there in Wichita Falls and lived there for a while. And then I met my wife and we moved. Obviously, we weren't married at the time when we met. And then we moved here. And I started my professional career in 2013. Prior to that, I worked in retail mostly. And so I switched over to the professional side of things, financial services and that type thing in 2013. Been doing that. And then as we'll get into in January of 25, I was part of a workforce reduction. And that sort of began this journey that I'm, that we're going to talk about today. And kind of brings us all the way to where we are, where we are now.
Yeah. What drew you to financial services? Were you just liking, have you always kind of had a knack for it, or did you just like it, or what
No,
was?
not at all. My education is in health sciences and exercise. So most of that's like kinesiology, that type of thing. I really, honestly, I wanted to be a strength coach and own and run a gym. That's like was my dream. What drove my change? Like I said, I spent about a decade working in retail. So I knew in starting a family, it doesn't really work real great working in a mall, and with crazy hours and, they're open 7 days a week. So I never got 2 days off in a row. It was really that need for some security and a better schedule and something that can support my family better. Cause I wasn't going to, work in a retail. There's not a whole lot of ways that you can work up the chain. Right. So, or at least get promotions and that kind of thing. So I needed a big boy job, and not to put down anything about working in, retail or working in malls or anything like that. But I needed something that was a little more secure. And it was honestly a friend of my wife's was like a recruiter. And we heard about this job fair. And so I just went, and I just thought, well, let me check it out, see what it's like. It ended up being for their call center, like collections space. And you go through that and they kind of do like a little mini interview with everybody. And then they asked me to come back, and then I got an offer. So that's kind of where it started, all the way back in June of 2013.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it's interesting, the pivots that everybody makes with what they think they want to do, and then what ends up being your career. I got a master's in entertainment business. I thought I wanted to be a band manager.
Okay.
I'd been in bands for a long time. I played all through college, did a bunch of stuff like that. And then I thought, well, I want to get into this business. And so I did that and got a master's in it and the whole 9 yards, and then realized that making 10% of $100 with local bands isn't going to be much of a career.
Not going to cut it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I just stuck with what I'm doing. And then it's kind of cool because we're a little bit of kindred spirits, because I found out we're both project managers in different realms. So we kind of have the same thought process. I have a feeling that, and we'll get into that too, but like what it is about project management that speaks to you, because I'm curious if it's similar to me. When the reduction happened in 2025, was this your first time going through a reduction?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you think about it, I was in retail for about 10 years, and then I switched over to my former employer. and was there for 11 and a half years. So, I mean, between those two spaces, I mean, really, 20 something years, that was the first layoff I had been included on. Actually, probably 6 or 8 years before, my younger brother worked at the same company, and he got caught up in a layoff about, prior to that. So I at least understood kind of what they did in the process. So I was familiar with it because I kind of had to help him through it. He's a couple years younger than me and wasn't, he just kind of showed up one day and kind of the same thing that happened to me. You show up and they don't really announce anything. They don't tell people it's going to happen. They just pull you into an office or, in my case, it was a Zoom call, just pull you in and just say, hey, here's what's going on and here's what you're going to get. Very fortunately, my company did have a very good severance policy, especially, based on tenure as well. So I came out pretty well, in terms of the severance. I was very gracious and I'm very blessed to have gotten that, because I know a lot of people that get caught up in layoffs don't get anything. They don't get severance. They just get a phone call or a Zoom call or a meeting in an office, and they get like a thanks, see you later. So I am very fortunate to get what I got, but I was, like I said, that was my first experience with it firsthand. And it was something.
Yeah. What was your emotions like that time? Because whether fortunately or fortunately, I think I was telling you when we talked before, whether fortunately or fortunately, when I got caught up this last time, I had been through it a couple times before. So I kind of knew what to expect with emotions and the process, even though it's changed, and we'll get into that. But like, I kind of had an idea, but what was your emotions like? And what did you do first after you found out?
Well, yeah, to give a little backstory, I kind of wasn't happy where I was at. I had some conflict. My boss and I did not get along. We had just a personality issue. I did not do well with her communication style, her management style. There was a lot of other things, I think, kind of going around in the area. So I honestly had been looking to get off of that team so I was laid off in January. So for a while before that, so like October, maybe a little before, like August, September, maybe somewhere around in there. So I was looking for a way off the team. So in a way, it was a bit of relief. I was definitely not happy because of the nature of my relationship with my boss. I was having a lot of anxiety, and as part of this experience, like being at work and going through a boss that doesn't really, that you don't work well with, or you have conflicting personalities, my anxiety started to flare up, and I learned that I had anxiety. I did not know that I had like medical anxiety before. As part of that, I didn't know what was happening. I was like having these moments where like I felt like I was going to die. I call them anxiety attacks, but panic attack things where like my heart would race and it wouldn't stop. I mean, I couldn't calm down. It's almost like I was stuck and my engine wouldn't downshift. Like when you go to lay down at night and you're kind of like, you kind of can feel your, slowly clicking down and your gear shift down, and it just wouldn't do that. I mean, I had one night I was staying and my heart rate was like at like 110 or 120, and just, it wasn't like it was racing, right? But it's not a heart rate that you should have when you're laying down flat in bed, right?
Right.
Chilling. Went to the doctor and he's like, yeah, dude, you've got generalized anxiety. Okay. And then I start looking back and I realized I had this light bulb moment. Like there's these times that over the course of my life, I had these before, and I just, it's not something that I recognized. So I learned about myself some things over the course of this. And then as soon as I got laid off, my anxiety level just plummeted. I was a lot happier the day after I got laid off than the day before. Now, that being said, there were a lot more and other stresses. But when it came to, I think, my mental well-being, I was in so much of a better place, knowing that I didn't have to go back and deal with this person ever again.
Yeah.
So the first thing I did was just kind of laugh. It was really nice because after they pulled me in, they said, so they pulled me into a Zoom call. Well, let me take a step back. So I'll just tell you kind of the story of that day. So I was working from home, and we work with a lot of locations. So we worked with a lot of locations. I was mentoring a young lady who wanted to get into project management, and she was in one of the call centers for the bank arm of the company I work for. And we started getting some like whispers, like messages and stuff that they pulled in one of the whole sites, one of the whole contact centers at one of the locations, and laid everybody off. So I messaged her and I was like, hey, have you heard any rumors about this? Cause she was in bank call center just at another location. And she was like, I was just about to message you about this. Like, I don't know what's going on. People are kind of freaking out. And I was like, well, let me see what I can find out. Cause I do a lot of people, and I'm like kind of messaging. And one of the other guys I work with, he's like, hey, have you heard this? And I'm like, I'm checking it out. And then like half an hour later, I kind of get some invites pop up from my senior director. And then they kind of disappeared because I was in the middle of a meeting. And then it pops up again, and she sends me a message. She's like, hey, can you jump on this call? And I said, sure. Jump on. It's her and HR, and they basically just give me the spiel. And I'm sitting basically right here where I am now. My wife's like in the kitchen, and I put it on mute. I wasn't on camera, but I put it on mute. I said, I'm about to get fired. I could tell. I mean, you can just tell by the language that they're talking. You can tell by what they're saying. I was like, I'm about to get fired. And, her eyes got like giant. And I was just kind of laughing. And so I was trying to take notes and listen to what they said, but I was fairly familiar. And then at the end, she just said, you can be done. She's like, you don't have to do anything else today. You don't have to work at all. Yeah. You're like, when you're done, you can just close your laptop and you don't have to do anything else. And I was like, okay. Me being who I am, she said, you'll have access for a certain amount of time to some of the things and whatever. So the way they did it was they do what they call a garden leave. So you're on leave, so you're still employed by the company, which means you can still get benefits and things like that. So that was nice too. So it was basically like 8 weeks of being on garden leave. During that time, you can apply internally and you can apply externally, but you still get benefits. So I got benefits through the end of March. My 8 weeks went through like the first or second week of March. And then I got benefits through the end of the month. So I just got on, and I was like, I thought they would cut everything off, and they didn't. So I sent out, I kind of set up my away message as like, hey, I'm not going to be here anymore. Sent an email to all the people that I really liked and that I cared about, and, coworkers that, I had a really good relationship. And I just said, hey, here's what's going on. And I'm, please, connect with me or whatever, but I'm not going to be here anymore, kind of thing, paraphrasing, obviously. And then, and then people were just messaging me back and forth. I had access for a couple of days, which apparently not everybody did, but I had access for a couple of days. So I just kind of messaged people and let everybody know. And then I got laid off on January 7th, or told I was going to be, laid off January 7th. On January 8th, I started my job search. So
yeah,
I just transitioned directly from being employed to searching for a job. I knew that the job market was tough. I had heard it, I'd seen on the news, and I'm on, LinkedIn and whatever. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and, a lot of articles and people and things like we're talking about. I knew that was the scenario, and I knew I did not have any time to waste. So, I mean, I literally I made a plan that night, and I started the very next day and started off on my plan and went through.
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. The ominous email or meeting invite that comes out of nowhere.
Have a quick
it's funny
chat.
how it's funny how when you really take some time away from it and you look back, you can kind of see some humor in the situation a little bit. The first time I got laid off, it was traumatic, of course. It was the first time I'd been laid off, but there was some humor in it, in that it was kind of one where I worked for an oil and gas service company. And so it was kind of one where they were doing it each week on like a Tuesday. It was
Ugh.
like Black Tuesday. And so I would watch like the guy 2 desks down from me 2 weeks previous to me, and then the guy next to me the week before me. And so it was one of those situations. And so the moment I got this email to meet at like 9 a.m., I had just gotten to the office and I knew what it was.
Yeah.
And I walked straight into my boss's office because I had known her for a long time. So I walked straight into her office. I said, I know what this meeting's about in an hour. Can we just do this now?
Yeah.
But HR wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so I caught her completely off guard. And she goes, no, you need to come back at 9. Right. And so I spent the next hour kind of saying somewhat goodbyes to the people that I was seeing. And then as soon as I walked in, there was HR and it was in person. And there was a few things that made me laugh. So the last email I got from the company was, okay, we're ready for you, which is a weird email to get as your final email. And then I walk in and they go through their spiel, same thing. There's a packet, the whole 9 yards. And on the very last page of the packet, it said, join our company alumni page on Facebook. And it just made me laugh, and which was good.
Yeah.
And then there was like, we were on the 9th floor of this building. And so my boss kind of walked me to the elevator. And as I'm sitting there at the elevator, she clearly doesn't know what to say. And I don't know what to say because I've just been fired. And so now we're standing there and the only thing she can think to say is, okay, keep in touch. And that made me chuckle too. And then that was, I was like, all right, which ultimately I did. And she was a good person and we still are connected and things like that. But it's funny how that, as you look back on it, there's some humor to it.
Yeah.
Which is good that you can kind of look at it and go, okay, this wasn't the end of the world. It was crazy, but it wasn't the end of the world. But when we talked a week ago, when we kind of first met up, you said something really interesting to me. And I'd like to kind of get into what your strategy was when you started applying and really started looking. Because you told me that it was, you played the numbers game.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing because you see a lot of people that are trying to play the numbers game and it's not working for them. So tell me a little bit about your strategy and how you really started getting into applying and how you would do that.
Yeah. Yes. So I knew going into this, you talk about, I don't want to link everything to project management because sometimes I do that, but there's a planning phase, right? And there's some things that you have to do. You have to plan based on your assumptions, right? So you got your RAID log where you document like all your risks and things. But one of those key things is assumptions. And so I had a lot of assumptions about job hunting. One, there were a lot of people out there, and two, the market was tough. I knew you have to use that old adage, right? Like you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And that was really my plan. Was I came up with this strategy, and this is kind of, for all job seekers that ever ask me advice, I always say the first thing you do is form a plan and stick to it. That's number one. Whatever that plan is, you may go, there's really, two ways you can look at it, two ends of the spectrum, quality versus quantity. You have to decide where on that spectrum of quality versus quantity that you want to line up and spend your time. But pick a lane, pick a spot, build a plan and go with it. So for me, I wanted to do something where I could crank out a lot of applications, still doing the things that you need to do, meaning tailoring your resume for the role and, adding in like some of those buzzwords, making sure that it fits the industry, because I wasn't limiting my search to a specific industry or job type. So the first thing that I wanted to do was find a way to speed up my process. I knew one of the biggest things that I had experienced before was tailoring my resume. I knew that was going to take a lot of time. And if I wanted to play the numbers, I needed to come up with a good process that could reduce that time of like getting my resume ready before I send it out. So I started looking and asking. I had a guy that was just on our team had got let go for other reasons, which I did not agree with, and he's a good guy. But anyway, I asked him like, hey, you just started looking a few months ago. Like, have you come into any tools? Right. So he says, yeah, I've got a couple of AI tools that I use. And so I started Google searching and doing the things, and I came up with a couple of tools. So I had one that was really good at, I loaded in basically my longest, most comprehensive resume as your base. And then you can go to that and it'll say tailor it for a role. So you copy and paste the job description, put it in, and it spits out like all the different sections with like a tailored version of each of those things, tailored bullets, everything to try and match up with job description. Okay, cool. So then I would save that. And then I had another one that was really good at comparing resumes to job descriptions. So I did the first AI to get the resume the way I liked it, because it was better in like design a little bit. Some of the tools were easier to kind of quickly customize things. So I used it to get it looking the way that I want, and get the, kind of the structure and some of that formatting and all of those kinds of things that make it look nice. And then I put the text of that into this other one, and it would compare and say like, what's your compatibility? So it would be like, oh, it's like pretty good, or it needs work in here. One of them I used the paid version, the other one I used the free version. But almost all the AI resume tools out there now have like a free and a paid. And I highly recommend those. If there's anybody out there looking and that's something that you want to use, I would encourage it, because it does speed up your process, whatever your process happens to be. I'm not saying mine is the best, but it does make things easier. And then you need to go back and like read it too, right? Because sometimes it doesn't always. It would word things that sounded nice, but it didn't always fit exactly what needed to be. So anyway, I built that process, and then I just started cranking them out. And my goal was 10 a week. And so I figured if I got 10 a week, 10 per day.
10 per day.
So that gets me at, if I go 5 days a week, that was 50 a week. I also so taking a step back, also part of my plan was only doing job searching during when I would normally work. So I needed to set boundaries. So that was the other thing, right? So set a process, set boundaries. 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. That's when I'm going to be doing my job searching. Now, I'm not going to be doing it 100% of those times, but those are my working hours. And I'm not going to do anything outside of that unless it's just ones, twos, here or there kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would do, so if that's 10 a day, 5 days a week. So thinking, 20 work days in a month. So I figure that's 200 applications a month. That's pretty good. And that was my plan. Crank out, sometimes it was 10, sometimes I got 20, sometimes I got 3, sometimes I got 1 or 2 a day, depending on the roles. And so once I had my application sending process, then my application search, my like job role search process began. And that was, every day I'd wake up, and usually it was about an hour or two, I'd get my coffee, get settled, and I would start just looking through the job boards, and I would hit save, like you can favorite them or save them or whatever. And so I would do LinkedIn. I had Indeed and ZipRecruiter and Monster, had all the boards. LinkedIn was my favorite, just because of the way it was structured, and the type of jobs that it would pull up for me. I didn't have a lot of success with the other ones, but I did use them. So I would save however many I was going to get, and, for an hour or two, and then I'd come back, and then I would do my second layer of review. So I would look in and I would read the details. Is this job a good fit? Like, do I like the company? Because I was just clicking them based on kind of like a quick cursory, like, this kind of looks like something I could do. And then I would look, and one would be like, oh, you need to be stationed in like Charlotte, North Carolina. Well, okay, I can't do that. This one needs 10 years of construction project management experience. Yep, don't have that. So I would start to like clear out of the list that I had, the quick list, and kind of get a short list. And so by then I would try to get, somewhere between 5 to 10 on my short list. And then I would go through my process of application. And some of those were easy applies. I know it's kind of like a rule out there now. You're not supposed to really use easy apply, but I figured it's better than nothing and at least gets it out there. So I counted those. And I did find some places where some people did get hired from easy apply. It's a lot harder because it's so much easier. So many more applications get to those roles.
Yeah. And you're finding that there's a lot of bots, or there's just a lot of people that are mucking that up. And so it kind of, now I got a job off of easy apply back in 2020, I guess. But it was a different time.
Yeah.
And so you're right. Like the easy apply kind of, it makes it really convenient, but it makes it convenient for everybody. And there's a lot of things that you almost can start playing the lottery in that form of fashion. But I'm sorry I interrupted you, but
no,
I agree with your assessment there. It's kind of, it's easy, but it's also easy for everyone.
Exactly. And that's what I knew, right? Like I knew going into it, the numbers were not going to be in my favor. And so if I could drop at least my hat, because there's, you think of it like a lottery, right? Like imagine you have this giant bucket of tickets, right? And that's one job. And everyone who puts their ticket in is trying to get a chance at it. So if I were to say, if I put one ticket in and I spend a lot of time on this one bucket, and it doesn't happen, I've spent a lot of time with one opportunity. So my thought was, if I can get something that comes close to successful or comes close to what I need, think your 80-20 rule, like 80% good, 20% like could be better. If I just get it to 80% good, I can get it in right in as many buckets as I can and give myself that chance. I might have some more success, because if I try and put my ticket in a bucket that has like 1,000 other tickets, my chances aren't zero, but they are lower, right? But then the more that I can do that, I don't really know. There's a lot of, and that was the other thing that I battled with, right? There's a lot of external factors that I don't know. I don't know who else is applying. I don't know how many other people are applying. I don't know what system they're using. ATS tracking, right, is a big thing right now. A lot of people look at it as a wall, and really the way it just works is a filing system. And so sometimes they'll have like compatibility based on keywords, and it kind of pulls those, like they can filter and they say, I want people that have this, and it will pull those kind of like to the front. It's more of a filter, or like an intuitive filter. So you got to like try to find a way to put all the right buzzwords in so you can at least get pulled to the front. And even then, right, like if I get 1,000 people and they're like, we just, they get the first 300 and they have like 40 good applicants out of the first 300, the other 700 don't even get looked at. I mean, I've still got like those rejection notification emails. I'm still getting some of those from jobs that I applied to months and months ago.
Yeah. I just got one 2 weeks ago from one I applied to in November.
Yeah. And they're like, sorry, we didn't get a chance to talk to you.
Yeah.
But,
we decided to move another direction. You're like, I figured.
Yeah.
Like,
I got
back
it.
In December,
Thanks.
I figured, but thank you for the notification. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. What kind of networking were you doing? Were you reaching out to old colleagues? Were you kind of doing some of that? If it was a position that you were really interested in, I'm sure you had different buckets of, I'm interested in this, but I'm really interested in this one, and I really would like to have this one, and kind of these things. Were you doing any of the reaching out to people and trying to get any kind of referrals, or what kind of networking were you doing during all?
Yeah, I wasn't doing a lot. I'm not a big networking person. I did have that, and that's just part of my personality. I'm more introvert, right? So it's
Okay.
me and my wife and my daughter are all introverts. And it's not that we don't like having friends. It's just we're not super outgoing people, and that's just how we are. And then my son is 100% polar the opposite. Like he talks to literally everyone. Everyone's his friend, that kind of thing. So, but for me, networking is a very it's an awkward thing for me to network. I just never have been good at it. And it's interesting you bring this up. So, as part of when I so before I was laid off, I mentioned right, like I was looking to leave the team. At that time, I was trying to look and see like what's the best way if I'm trying to get hired to connect with people or like get those ends. And I said, well, start being more active on LinkedIn. That was like one of the number one things that came across. So they were like, comment, engage with posts, and make posts. So I knew I wasn't going to like really talk to people. I wasn't going to do the traditional networking, like, hey, do you want to connect and be my friend and let's go have coffee? Like, I'm not that kind of person. But what I can do is I don't mind like connecting and following a person and liking and doing a little commenting. So I said, how can I bridge this gap? And then the other thing it says is do posting. And I was like, well, I can try that. So I started posting, doing a daily post. My goal was to do one a day because what I wanted to do is increase my engagement, which they say will bring you up in the algorithms and move you to the top of application
It's what brought
stuff.
you to my feed.
Yeah. So maybe there's something to it, right?
That's what brought you to my attention. Yeah. That's what made me see you.
That's where this whole, my sort of the birth of the idea behind what my networking strategy was going to be for my layoff started back then. And I knew I needed to be more engaged in LinkedIn. So I was trying to do posts to just grab engagement. And it's a learning experience, especially as someone who's not I'm not an influencer, and I don't do that kind of thing. And I don't really follow a lot of those people for that purpose. I mean, I do, right? I have a couple of socials, but we're not super big into it. So I'm not, like I'm saying, it's not organic to me, right? It's not something that's natural to me. So I was learning a lot about that whole experience and kind of did that. And so I did that for a few months, and then it kind of fell off. I got laid off. And then I said, well, you know what? I got to stay engaged. So my plan as part of my networking and that engagement piece was to post every couple of days. And I came up with this concept called it the layoff log. And I think somewhere back in my psyche, this is funny because one guy called it out on one of my posts, and I didn't know that I thought of it this way, but I did. It's absolutely where it came from. When I was a kid, my dad loved Star Trek: The Next Generation. We would watch it like every night that it was on or whatever. And in the Star Trek, there's this thing where the captain does captain's log, right? Like they'll start a segment, it's captain's log. And somewhere that was sitting in my brain, and that kind of populated this concept of the layoff log, right? Like I started doing this because I wanted it to be a little cathartic, right? Almost like a little bit of therapy, but two, I needed to engage, and I didn't know how else to engage. I didn't know anything else really, that I had a lot of material to talk about. And so I just used this as like, well, I know I've got a lot of feelings and thoughts about this topic. So let me just kind of like so I started to come up with different topics every few days, either experiences that I had, trying to get people engaged, like thought-provoking things. Some of my first posts were more almost like one of the first ones I posted was I laid out all of the shirts and all of the swag and all of the branded material that I had from my company. And I laid it all out. I had 30 something shirts, but like polos and t-shirts and things like that, and backpacks and like all this branded stuff. Like this is like almost 12 years of stuff. Right. And it was a little surreal to see, like it was like a third of my closet. I pulled all that stuff out, and then there's this just giant hole in my closet. And this is where all stuff that I love wearing like the branded stuff, right? Because that's something I don't have to think about. I can just throw it on. I can wear it to work, and it works great. And I had a shirt for all the holidays. No, I had
Right.
like 6 or 7 polos. I had like the employee, like the volunteer work, like all of those types of things. And for almost, over over 11 years, I had all that. And so anyway, that the post, that kind of became my way of letting it out a little bit, but then also, the big thing that I wanted to do is let people know that they weren't alone. And as we talked about a little bit, right? Like it can be, especially in this sort of like, digital and Zoom world that we've created for it can be lonely.
Yeah.
It can be an experience that, you're sitting at home by yourself and you don't know what's going on, and you just are experiencing only your world. And sometimes the only thing that you have to see other people's world, stuff like LinkedIn or whatever. People on social
Yeah.
media, on Instagram or whatever, TikTok, they're not talking about getting laid off. They're talking about,
Sure.
they're doing dances and making funny videos and things like that, or politics or
Yeah, they're
whatever.
just showing the best aspects
Yeah,
of things, and it may not even be real. It's just what they
exactly.
think you want to see. And I think that's what resonates, is that you were being real. So it may not have been natural for you, but I know that's what resonated with me, was that you weren't being negative towards the market,
Yeah,
towards other companies, towards your former company. You were stating what you're really going through, but it wasn't in a tone of, to me, it wasn't in a tone of, look at what these people did to me. I'm now in this horrible spot because of this and this and this. Right.
yeah,
Because that doesn't really resonate with a lot of people. But if you say, this is what I'm going through right now, and this is the idea that we have, and this is reality versus what people are saying, then that's something that people do engage with. And I think you hit on the word that is the important word, which is engage. Whatever that looks like to you, whether that be, if you are a little more extroverted and you are a person that just goes out and meets people, then get engaged with talking to people and just becoming comfortable with being able to say, ask them questions, and then be able to say at some point, I am looking and here's what I think I can provide. So if you're extroverted, that could be your way, going to networking events, whatever, sending out messages on LinkedIn. Or you engage by what you're doing, of doing posts and staying active and getting your ideas out there, showing who you are for potential employees, or potential employers, so that they can see who you are and who they'd be hiring. So I think you hit on the word. I think it really is engagement. And the worst thing people can do is kind of sink back and almost expect something to come to them, because I don't think that may have worked in 2015. You may have just been able to send out an application, wait, they call you, you go through an interview, and then they make an offer or they don't, and then you hear and blah, blah, blah. But I don't think that works anymore. It seems like the people that are the most frustrated are the people who are just blindly sending applications. They don't have a plan, like you discussed, and are just waiting for something, and they're not engaging. So I think you hit on the word right there. I think engagement is the buzzword of the day, of you got to engage, whatever that looks like.
yeah, and it can be awkward. I mean, 100%.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
like I said, one piece of value I think I took out of this too was helping to get an objective view of my own branding. So I ended up getting an executive coach to help just with my professional career in general. I mean, originally it started as like, I'm in the job search. I need help with that, but I also just branding for myself, because I wanted to have more of they call it like executive presence, right? I wanted to show more that I'm a leader. I want to show that I want to lead with empathy. I want to do all these things, right? And that can be hard. I mean, it can be hard for people who don't know, they aren't social media lights or whatever they call them, right? So media, so I don't know, there's a word for that, but they're not in it. And I think I got started getting some objective, sometimes I don't want to say harsh, but like some feedback about what I was trying to put out into the world, and seeing comments, seeing the engagement, right? So I got LinkedIn Premium. I felt like that was a relatively good investment. And where I found value in that was the data that they allow you to provide. I don't know if it really pushed me to the top of any lists or anything like that, but it did
Sure.
give me a little more insight to what goes on in my feed, and sort of in the background. I could see a lot about like the engagement behind certain posts. And that helped me to be like, well, this post got 5,000 impressions, and this post got 137,000 impressions. Like, what's the difference there? And so that helped me also to kind of gauge like, oh, this is resonating with people, this one sort of, and try to help like focus those things too, because that feedback about branding, sometimes you aren't aware, like you just aren't like, I want to make sure that my messaging is correct. And that was a big part of what I would talk to my coach about, was like, I can communicate well, but am I getting the messaging right?
Yeah.
I can deliver the message. I just want to make sure that I'm coming from the right spot, that the origin of what that is correct. And so it was really good to see that. I mean, it was starting to resonate with people. And that's kind of some things that I would always see with other people too, is like, I don't want to be one of those, people that are like, hey, I'm an expert and you need to do this. Like, but I did reach out on some occasions to some people that I had connected with and be like, hey, would you take some advice? And usually they said, yeah. And I said, just be intent, have some intent with your branding, have some intent with your messaging. And because LinkedIn is not the same as Instagram and TikTok and all these other places, you need to be very specific about what you're bringing into the world in LinkedIn. You need to make sure that that's on brand. And if you're posting something, you need to know why you're posting it. What do I want out of this with the people that are interacting? Do I want them to like it? Do I want them to feel empowered? Do I want them to learn something? And some people would post, and I think they posted with, I want people to feel sorry for me. And that doesn't work super great on LinkedIn.
No.
And it's not anything wrong, but on a couple of occasions I was like, hey, like, you're absolutely valid to feel frustrated. You're absolutely valid to feel lost and confused and desperate. Like, all of those feelings are valid, but keeping that line of, this is what I'm going to process at home. I'm going to process it with my friends. I'm going to process it on other social media. LinkedIn is a different type of branding, and you need to keep that in mind every time that you post. And I fell victim to it too. I mean, I sometimes would post things and I would look back on it like, I don't know if that is really part of the brand. But just getting to the point where you're aware of it, right? Like, you don't have to be perfect every time, but learning to be aware of those things, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if you look at, LinkedIn started basically as an online resume in a lot of ways. And so it was always revolved around the professional world. So if you almost consider yourself, I remember one of the episodes I did early on was I had somebody come on here and I let them just tear my LinkedIn profile apart. Tell me where I suck.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things she said in the context of searching for a job is that I was too general. I was kind of like not really stating my intentions of where I wanted to go. What kind of job did I want? Where was I going? Those kind of things. Because the problem that I had, which is a little bit different than you spent 12 years at a place doing something. So you have extensive experience in that world and project management in that world and all of that, is that I have been in multiple places doing different things. I've been in multiple industries, I did marketing for a couple years, which is what I went to school to do. So I've got like a very diversified resume. And if I stay general, then it's very hard to see where do I want to go? What am I looking at? And so I think this branding thing that you're talking about is very important because especially as you're trying to grow in a company, you're wanting to project that you are a leader and that you are more than an entry level person, that you've grown into all these things. And so, yeah, if what you're posting is, one of my big problems being a project manager is that I'm a very compassionate, empathetic person. It got me starting this podcast. It got me doing a lot of that. But depending on how I would post things, I could almost show that side and not the leadership side, which I also have, which you need in project management. You're literally leading a project. You've got a team that you're trying to direct and doing all those things. And so I have to look at how I word things because I can tend to be more on the compassionate side, but that doesn't project when you're trying to get up into senior level and you're trying to get up into director level and you're trying to get up higher than that. That doesn't project well. So I think you're right on the money with that. And, if you look at this is my professional profile. This is who I am and this is what I want. And this is where I'm going. And if that kind of enters into your psyche, and yes, you need to look at all those analytics to know what's resonating and all those things and make sure that you're going in the right direction. And that's what that analytics is great for, and pay attention and do all those things. But I think you're right on the money. Like, you got to know what you're going towards and who you are and project yourself. Assume that companies are looking, I think.
Yeah. The other thing I learned is that I'm not good at tooting my own horn, and I'm not good at bragging about myself. And I think that just comes from, I do a job not because I want to impress people. And there are people out there that's their motivation. And I don't really care what other people think. And that's I'm not being, I don't really care. Not that I'm not taking feedback. That's not a motivator for me. If you think I do a good job or not means nothing. It's only if I think I do a good job. Right. And so anyway, if you have to find your motivator, you have to find those things. And, what I learned is I've got to learn to tell my story. And what does your story say? Like if you were writing a comic book about yourself, right? Like you don't put all the details, you don't put all the times you wash your hands, right? Like you don't put the mundane things. Like what's the highlight reel of you? And if you're like, that's the other thing is like, you have to sell yourself. And sometimes you got to kind of lie, and you don't lie, but you do lie. I mean, it's song and dance, all of it. You're telling the story of you, and it may not be you, but it's a version of you that is the best one that you sell, right? Like like selling vacuum cleaners. You're like, well, this picks up dirt. Yeah, but okay. But they don't put those on infomercials, right? Like they pick up where they're like sucking up like cream corn or something, or like a box of Legos. Like they want to show the things that
this will suck up a bowling ball.
Exactly. Yeah. How many times are you going to suck up a bowling ball when you're using your vacuum at home? You're not, right?
Yeah.
But you could. And so you have to kind of think of it. And it was a struggle for me and really, kind of still is even. Like, what are my like home runs? Like, what are the things that I'm super good at? Because I don't think of it that way. I think about, I did my job, I got my projects, I built good relationships with people. People are good at project management for a lot of reasons. They're good at organization. They're good leaders. They are good at planning. And for me, I'm good at building good relationships. That's just the thing that I have success at. And then I'm good at problem solving. And so I see projects as a problem, and I go, how can I get get this across the finish line. And it's learning how to brand that and taking all of those things and then using your examples. Those name a time when questions just murder me because they're too broad. I think in a very analytical way, and it's almost like, and I'm sure like, right, like when you have to submit requirements sometimes, either the teams you work with or you as a project manager. And when I get those questions in my brain, I'm like, there's not enough requirements. This is a really broad question. I know they're intended to be that way, and it can be beneficial. And you have to look at it in the way that looks at those things. But it's sometimes I would struggle with those because it's not enough detail. And one thing that really turned the corner for me was my executive coach was like, ask questions about the name a time when questions. Number one, it gives you some extra time to kind of process. But two, it lets you figure out what they really want in the name a time when questions. You don't want to say like, so what do you want me to say here? That's not the type of question. But what you can say is like, name a time when blah, 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 blah. And you're like, yeah, so are you talking about more of a situation like X or more of a situation like Y? And then you can say, well, I have some projects like that. I was in some context, give them some context. I have a couple of different things, a couple of different examples I think might fit. What do you think might be the most valuable? Do you want to hear more something about where, like I had this big project that I had to do, we onboarded a call center in South Africa. You want to hear about that? Or do you want to hear more about how I started a pilot and got a pilot program set up? Give them some questions. Like, don't feel like they say, name a time when you had a conflict with a leader and whatever, blah, blah, blah. And you just say, okay. And then you sit there in silence and you're like thinking, and it's okay to think, and that's fine too. But it leaves you on this end of, when that happens to me, my brain stops working, right? Like I get nervous and I'm like, well, I could do this one, or I could do this one, or I could do this one. You're like, but is this going to look bad? I don't know if this is the best example. I wonder what they're looking for. And all this is it going inside my head. And when my coach was like, just start asking them questions when you get your name a time when questions, it shows that you're being thoughtful about your answer, and it gives you some time to process a little bit and get your brain out of that fight or flight and let that logical thinking part of your brain take back over and say, okay, I think I've got a few examples. I started writing all of my examples. I've got a little whiteboard here on my, going to close in desk. I've got a whiteboard right here, and I had to write all of my different projects that I had.
That's smart.
Because I couldn't, I didn't get to take anything. It was all on company property. So I had none of my project documentation or anything.
Sure.
So I had to just start. I literally just wrote out like, here's a list of all the different projects I did, because I had to see them, because I would forget. I mean, I literally just like, I guess I didn't do anything in the last 10 years because I don't remember any of it,
Right. It's easy to forget all that you accomplished.
Yeah.
When you're in that fight or flight mode of that. I heard it said a little bit differently, but it's the same concept of, try to get, when you're in an interview, try to get them talking as much as possible.
100%.
Because if you're in a conversation and you can get them talking to you more, chances are they're going to remember that conversation as a good conversation because they talked more. People tend to think that, their contributions are the best.
Yeah.
And so when you can get them talking, can get them giving you examples, turn it back around on them and say, well, now tell me about your company and when you've had a problem with this. And then so I've heard it very similar of, get them talking too, because they like talking about themselves too. And then they're going to think that the conversation went even better because they talked a lot.
Yeah. And it was hard to learn. I mean, before I kind of picked up on some things, I mean, like I said, I started January and I didn't get this job offer until September. I was doing some work a little bit before that. So really, but I didn't have anything. I had zero offers or anything for, basically 7 months. But I did interviews and I did bomb a few interviews. And when you get to the more that you talk, the more that it puts in your place, the more the opportunity you have to bomb it. I don't mean that to scare anybody, and I don't mean that to say whatever, but you're absolutely right. And when it becomes more of a conversation and you're able to get feedback and learn about really what they want to hear instead of just guessing, it gives you that much more advantage.
Yeah. Well, and then you can learn. I think that the biggest thing I talked to this girl named Jessica, I saw her on TikTok, ironically, and she was going through a job search and she would make content about different things. And I thought it was really interesting. So I reached out to her, same as I reached out to you. And she had a phrase that I thought was really interesting. She would brand it as confidently delusional or delusionally confident, either way, where she kind of would trick herself in her mind of she's going into an interview. And even though you know that they're talking to 3 other people, 6 other people, however many people, in her mind, she had convinced herself that she was the candidate. Like it was hers to lose. And so she went in with what she would call delusionally confident, like aura of this is mine to lose. And I'm going to own this interview right now. And I'm going to talk to you and we're going to get to know each other as if we're already going to be coworkers almost. And that was her strategy. And I thought that was a really interesting strategy to go in. And because again, it's easy to lose what all you've accomplished because you just got let go from a company. Your confidence has been kind of hit a little bit. Suddenly you start forgetting that, oh, I did this and I did this and I did this and we did really well here. And like, we really did a lot, but I'll diminish that because I don't feel good. And I know I've kind of gone over time with you, so I want to try to give you back your Saturday, but and you may have already stated this, but what do you think is the biggest thing that you learned about yourself as you went through this transition that you think would be helpful for others?
That's a really good question. I mean, I did learn, as I mentioned about messaging and branding was the first, I think the first big thing is learning about what I want to share and then learning how people perceive that. But I think on a more like personal level, I really learned that I was not as good at this as I thought I was going to be. I have decent communication skills. I've done these various jobs. I thought my resume was just going to speak for itself. I thought that not that I wouldn't have to put in effort because I knew, I mean, it wasn't like that, right? But I thought I was just going to be a superstar. I thought I was like, I've got a legit resume. I've got my bachelor's degree. I have good communication. I've worked with stakeholders. I've convinced people to work for me and with me. I've built good relationships. I've done all of this stuff. And I thought that was just gonna, like, I could just ride that and it would take me everywhere. And I learned very quickly that it's as much luck and timing as it is preparation. I had interviews where people were immediately ready to not believe me. I had interviews where I prepared for one thing and got asked something entirely different, and that threw me off. I learned that I was not very good at kind of in that note, when I'm not prepared, that I fall apart. I would fall apart. And it was hard in a couple of instances. I had a really tough time after some interviews that I thought were going to go really well and they didn't go really well. And I blamed myself, but I spent all this time preparing for this certain type of thing. And I get asked entirely different questions. And it was like a comedy of like, I got tripped. Like if you ever see someone, they trip and they fall and they try and get up and then they fall again. And then it's everyone's just watching this person who should have not fallen continue to fall because now they like have like a bruised knee or like it hurt really bad, and then they like got the wind knocked out of them, and then they're making a weird sound, and then they're like continuing to fall, but then they hit a hill, and then they like keep like you're just like watching this train wreck, and that's me sort of watching myself like, wow, like this one little thing tripped me up, and I was like, I see myself as someone who has confidence, who can speak well, who can manage diverse teams. And it was a lot of humility about this process, really exposing my true self and say, you're not as fantastic as you think you are. Not that I'm putting myself down, but I do kind of feel like I had a little bit of an ego about, I can, job search. I got this. I've got all these skills. I've got all this, and it's its own unique skill. Job hunting is a skill. Applying is a skill, and interviewing is a skill. These are all 3 different skills that have some application across like other things that we do, both in the corporate, like white collar, blue collar, all these different roles, right? They have application across everything. But in the end of the day, they're their own skill, and you only do it when you need a job. And if you're in a job for a long time, like I was, think that you still have these things, and then all of a sudden you realize you don't. You just have to not take it as personal as you can, because you, like I said, I prepared for a lot for certain interviews, and I just blew them. I bombed them. Stuff that I knew. I looked like I was making it up. It looked like I knew after the interview, like they turned that call off, and they're like, that guy just AI'd his whole resume and he has no clue what he's talking about.
Oh yeah.
I know they thought that, right? But this job that I landed was a combination of some really good, empathetic, and intelligent interviewers who were not about trying to test me. They were about trying to learn about me. And that made a big difference. And then teaming that, good timing for me on my side, learning a few techniques that helped me to settle, helped me to engage with the interviewers better.
Yeah.
And then this job that I got, and this is the last thing, is always, even if you don't do a great job in an interview, try to make a good impression. Not every interview that you have, you're going to land. And that's, unless you're just super lucky, right?
Sure. Even if you destroy it and you do amazing and do everything you want to do. Yeah.
It could just be an external, maybe they have someone, already in the company they were going to slot in. Maybe it's just a toss of a coin. The job that I got, I originally applied back in October with the same company. So a year ago, they have a very mature and well-developed PMO across their team. If anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's a project management organization. So it's, instead of having project managers within the business, it's a fully functioning department of project management. So they have a high level, they call them enterprise PMO or enterprise project managers that work for the whole company. And then they call them hubs that are like within the different departments and smaller under the umbrella that do projects for the departments. And then they work with the enterprise guys, right? So I applied for an enterprise level project manager role. It all went really well, but they were looking for someone with very specific experience. They wanted closer to like 10 years of experience in certain types of projects and scopes and things. But the hiring manager really liked me, and he ended up following me on LinkedIn. So we engaged a little bit. And then in April, they had an in-person networking event. I went, and he happened to be there, and I got a chance to talk to him again. He was like, yeah, man, by the way, he's like, we really liked you. We wanted you on the team. We just, our leadership team was being really picky about who we hired. He's like, we just now got someone in that role. He's like, we're interviewing in October. It's like, they're just starting in a couple of weeks now. And this was April, right? So pretty long time. He's like, but we put in the notes, you'd be a really good fit for one of the hub project managers. We think that'd be a good place to get you in. And he's like, I'll just keep my eyes out for you. He's like, I've been following you on LinkedIn, following your posts, and your journey. He's like, and I'm really rooting for you. I was like, well, that's cool. I appreciate that. Then kind of went on and did my thing. And then in like June, he messages me on LinkedIn. It's like, hey man, there's a Hub project manager role that I think you should apply for. He's like, I know the leader. She's amazing. He's like, you should do it. And I said, okay. So I like literally stopped what I was doing, ran over to the computer. I got my application in, let him know. And lo and behold, it took a while because I went through a couple of rounds, and apparently it got down to me and one other person, and they were having a trouble decide. So they wanted to meet with me again. And so met with them again. And I just was like, I had no idea how to prepare for this last one. I just was like, I tried to be as enthusiastic about it. And it's like, look, if I had a feeling it was me and one other person, I was like, I want to show them that I want it more. Yeah, I want to answer all the questions, but I want them to feel confident that like I'm the most excited. I'm the one that is going to love this job. I'm the one that's going to love to be there the most. They called me. They called me about an hour and a half after the interview. So it was like at 4:30. So at 4:30 to 5, my daughter plays volleyball at school at like 6. So we basically had to leave right after the interview, go over to play volleyball. And I get a phone call from a random number. And I'm like, I'm not going to answer it. I'm at a volleyball game. And then at like 9:00 at night that night, I was like, hey, I wonder if that person left a voicemail. And I go and I look, and it was the recruiter calling from her mobile, and was like, I couldn't wait to tell you, they want to make you an offer. I'll send you all the stuff in the morning. And I was like so fired up about it because I had worked with that recruiter. This was the third time. So back in October, I applied for another role that I ended up not getting, and then this one. So like I was on a first name basis with this recruiter. And she was like, this has been such a long time coming, and I'm so happy for you. But the point here is that, yeah, networking is LinkedIn. Networking is going to meet and greets and connect events and things like that, and there's a lot of places you can find that tell you what those are. But the sleeper, the one that people don't think about, is make a good impression, right? With the person you're interviewing with, even if you don't have the exact skill set, even if you don't, whatever, this is an opportunity to get at companies that you like or that you want to be at, and make a good impression with somebody. Because this guy, I owe almost it all. I told him, I was like, next time I see you, man, I'm going to go buy you a couple beers, because the fact that he just was like, oh, you should apply for this one. I know the manager, I know the hiring manager. She's great. He's like, you'd love to be on this team. I really like her a lot. And so just having that connection is what I think really landed me this one, or at least got me to apply, because I hadn't seen it. I hadn't seen the application at that time. And so
well, you know what I love about this one, I've found myself as I've gone throughout this journey myself and doing this podcast, like I get genuinely excited for somebody when something works out. Like I couldn't contain my smile when you were telling me your story. But the other thing is, you told me when I asked you about networking, you said I'm not very good at it, and I'm not very good. But what landed you the role was that you were really good at it. Like you did it right. Like you were doing it, and it may not be comfortable for you, and it may not be this, but you were good at it. And that's what ultimately landed you. And what's funny is every guest I've had, in some form or fashion, everything has come down to some form of human connection. All the technology is great, all the AI, all the LinkedIn posts, all the job boards, all the stuff. But in some form or fashion, there's somebody who becomes your advocate, who you just meet randomly, and you start striking up a conversation and realize that you have value that will plug a hole for them, or whatever that situation is. Same with me. We have a similar story. I know we talked about that. I applied for a job in February, didn't get it, made an impression on the hiring manager. And when they did have an opening, he suggested to the recruiter that they reach out to me again, right? Similar situation. And that's just, it's the beauty of it, that you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what closed door is not an actually closed door. It's just hey, just wait a second. We got you. You just got to hold on a second. And I love the fact that it did come down to something that you thought you weren't very good at, that you ended up succeeding at and doing really well at, and making the right decisions of going to a networking event that you probably didn't want to go to and staying in contact with that guy. And that's really awesome. So I'm super excited for you. Last question, and then I'll let you have your Saturday. If I came to you, and you kind of have answered this a little bit, but if I came to you today and I said, Chris, I just got laid off. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. What would be the first bit of advice that you would say to me as I would be going through this journey?
Yeah. Number one, it's going to be okay. And I think that's the thing that everyone there's a million things you can worry about. And there will be a million things you can worry about. But you have, number one, the first thing you have to do is take a breath, relax, know it's going to be okay, and know that the only things, and this is a good life advice too, but the only things you can control are the things you can control. You can't control the job market. You can't control if people will look at your application or if they'll be nice to you in an interview. You can't control any of that. So you focus on the things that you can control. So build a plan and a process and stick to it. Number one. And you build your plan, right? You stick to it, but adapt it as you go. You're going to learn things. You're going to grow. Just like a project plan. And I'm sure, from project manager standpoint,
speaking my language.
You build your plan, and eventually, like by the end of it, it does not look. It gets way uglier at the end of the project usually.
Sure.
Because of what you had, things change and whatever, right? Very rarely do you have a nice, clean project plan by the end of them because of the way a lot of things go. But you start with the plan and you stick to it as best you can, and you grow and you change with it, right? Build your plan. That's number one. Number two is build your brand. Who do you want to be to these prospective employers? Who do you want to project yourself as? This is different than changing who you are. This is just what do you want? What's the best version of you that you want to put forward, and be very purposeful and have intent in whatever you're doing to stick to that brand. It's like your core, there's a lot of process to this, but you can build out your core values and like your thing, like you can there's a process for all that, right? That forms who you are, but you need to do that. What are the things that are important to you? What is your brand? What are the like problems and things that you can solve? And stick to that. Write it, print it out, or write it on something. Put it where you can see it every day. This is my goal. These are the markers that I'm sticking to. Whatever that is, right? And then prepare. I had one interview where I was preparing for, I mentioned I bombed a few. One of them, I struggled with name a time when questions. So I spent hours preparing name a time when questions. And this interview rolls around and they ask me no name a time when questions. They asked me about my resume, like to the bullet. And I hadn't looked, I looked at my resume, but I hadn't thought about, because I wrote it months back. And I just been using these tools to get the application out. And I hadn't gone back and reviewed my resume and they were asked, like, what is this one bullet? Tell me about this project and how much money you saved on this. Like, what was this? And I froze. I don't know. And I went back, and afterward, what I did was I went back through my resume. I printed it out and I wrote next to it. I had a little tangible copy and I said, this is this project. This is this project. This is this project. So I could remember. And it helped a lot. But doing those things, right? Like doing all the preparation, when you prepare, it lets you relax. For me anyway. I think about, my read the job description. I look up the company, get some factoids on the company, practice my name a time when questions. I grab a handful of like stories, like kind of generic stories I can kind of bend in a few, and morph in a few different ways. But you got to prepare, because even the most professional of us, even the people that, and like I said, 100%, 100%, I thought I was just going to be a master at this. And you will learn the hard way that it is a skill. So just preparing and doing all the things ahead of time and taking it as seriously as you can will help you. So those are really the three things that I try to help everyone with. I think there's a lot of other details that I go into, and I'm always happy to help. When people ask me for help on LinkedIn, I'm happy to help. I give advice every once in a while, but like I said, I think going back, first thing you have to do is, if you get laid off, is just know it's going to be okay. I think a lot of people struggle, and I see it all the time, that even more now, people are going through really tough times. I mean, they're going to lose their house, or they're going to lose their car, or they can't pay their bills, or whatever. Like, people are really worried. Yeah, there's a lot you can worry about, but you can't let that get you down. You really need to, this is an imperative time that you have to focus on being positive, because the stuff will come, the worries will come, the struggles will come, and you can't focus on those. You have to focus on moving forward, making progress, and reach out for help.
Yep.
There's tons of people that are willing to help. They want to share their story. They like you, for example, just having something that you can hear and see, and this tangible experience that doesn't cost anything. There's so many people trying to make money off of job seekers right now. Like, there are people that'll do it for free, and it is what it is. I mean, you take the advice, you listen. I'm not a professional, I'm not an expert, but I think sometimes just that little gesture can make all the world a difference to someone who has just gone through something that they weren't really expecting.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it turns out for the happy, the happy ending, whatever, a lot sooner than later, but it will be okay.
Yeah.
Things will turn out. You just have to be patient.
Yeah. It's funny that you say, the tell me about a time question is what got you. For me, I can tell you exactly. I'll never forget the term ever again, but I got asked by a PMO director, second question of the interview. It's the moment I lost it. I know it. And he asked me a definition. He gave me a definition, and the term was velocity, but I could not think of the term. Velocity was nowhere in my brain, and I knew exactly what he was talking about, and I knew exactly the report that I would do. I knew exactly what the manager would be asking for and what they'd want to see, but I could not think of the term velocity. And I'll never forget it now, and I'll never forget the definition of it now because of that. But it was that, and that's what lost me, that particular position. But it's interesting. And the only thing that I'll throw in there is that you hit the nail right on the head. Like, people are more resilient than they think they are. These journeys of going through a job search is going to benefit you when you get to the next one. For you, that humbleness that you feel is going to help you grow in your next position, because now hey, I got some things I can learn still. And I know a lot, but I don't know everything. And that's only going to benefit you in the future as you move on with your career. And I think that's really cool. Well, Chris, I could talk to you for hours. I feel like I've known you for a long time, and we're not that far from each other. So hopefully our paths cross. Maybe when I'm down in the DFW area next time, I'll hook you up, and maybe we can go have a coffee or something. But I really appreciate you joining me, especially on a Saturday. And congratulations again for starting your next opportunity. And thank you for helping other people by posting on LinkedIn, because it is going to benefit someone, and you may never know the person that benefited the most from it. But thank you for doing that, and thank you for joining me today, and I hope we can do this again here soon.
Agreed. Thanks for having me, and I 100% agree. I hope that sharing my story and getting that out there, whether that's here or on LinkedIn or wherever, if it just gets someone through their day in their job search, whatever, just to know that in the end it will be okay. That's all that I think that I would ever want out of it. Just helping somebody out. So, thanks for having me, because this has been great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would love to have you again at some point. And man, thanks. I can't thank you enough, and we'll see you down the road.
All right.
All right. See ya. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. I want to thank David for coming on and for being so candid and for sharing his strategy and for opening up as to what he had to learn, how he grew, what his strategy was, and everything in between. As always, if you've made it this far in the podcast and you've hit that play button, thank you very much. And if you've listened to multiple episodes, I can't thank you enough, and I'll continue to say it on every episode. If you know someone who is going through a job search and is looking for a little encouragement, looking for a little bit of strategy, looking for different ideas on how they might find that next opportunity, I highly encourage you to forward this podcast on to them. I also ask you to rate and review this podcast wherever you're watching this or listening to it, whether it be on YouTube when you're watching the video, or if it's just on one of the podcast platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Play or wherever you may get your podcast. But that'll do it for this episode. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.